Fleming.
Hey, Frank. Hi, Anita. Hi, Daniel.
Thank you for coming to the
Oh,
gloss.
I appreciate you inviting me.
I'm so happy to have this opportunity to introduce you to the world of people who want to know who puts Michael Rainey in that I don't even know what you call that trench coat that faded from gray to who is that? Who did that? Where'd they get those clothes from? So it is my pleasure to finally let how many millions of fans that really identify the Power universe with not just the actors, but the style, the whole look, the storytelling through the wardrobe. And so, everyone, that is Frank Fleming.
Yay.
So, here he is live and in color. And so, let's just start there. Let's start with Power.
Okay.
And then we'll get into where you're from and all of that. But let's just go right to it and let's talk about when you were called to head up the design for Power, which is now a universe. What was your approach to these characters that have become iconic mainly through clothing?
I think the thing that was most important to me in signing on to be a part of Power was that we as people of color show up in the world in various ways and oftentimes misrepresented. I felt in a lot of the way we see each other in TV and movies. It's sort of um, not recognizing, our accessibility, the wealth, the money, the places that we do go regularly, and so for me that was very important in one how I sort of imagined the characters and sort of collaborated with or I wouldn't say collaborated, but and I would say expressed the importance of that with Courtney as she would write and support what we do. One of the things that people always say is just like, you guys must have an immense budget. Well, people of color these days have an immense amount of money.
That's true.
And they spend it,
Yeah,
a lot
spend it well.
and spend it oftentimes on how they look. So,
Mhm.
what I've always tried to do as a creative is to tell true stories, and it's organic and sort of uh, purest form, true to the story that we're telling.
One thing that I, just one being a part of the whole Power phenomena, but just also being a fan, being an observer, watching how the streets move different after Power came to the scene. And we had Empire going at the same time, and no discredit to them because they were giving fashion too, but Power was doing fashion in a very different way. And on a elevated level that wasn't loud and obnoxious, but very true to the storytelling that was different from whatever else that was out there. And I'm going to start with Ghost,
Yeah,
right?
well, I think one of the things that people oftentimes do, designers sometimes do, not all, but they look at things creatively with broad strokes and
Yeah.
not specifics or um, like really examining the people that you're looking at and the things that you do and what we do as a culture.
Yeah.
It's just a broad generalization of like, oh, that's what all Black people do.
Yes.
That's
Can't
what you
say
all
that.
look alike.
Yeah.
If you're over the top, this is what you should look like if you're
Right.
over the top.
Yeah.
I mean, and it happens, in other areas of design outside of people of color where, where that's one of the big differences, I think, between, let's just say Empire and Power.
For sure. And I think this subtlety, right? Because you did go to a different aesthetic for people of color, right? We're always known as, oh, label, 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 label. But so many times these were very high end, designers on the bodies of these actors, but if you weren't a fashionista or someone in fashion, you wouldn't have known that Omari was rocking a Tom Ford suit,
Right.
or Dior, or whatever you decided to put him in for. I think Farrar, you even gave like opportunity to new designers. You were
Devon
like
Scott, Musica
laying,
Freya, yeah.
yeah. And so when you started putting the character Ghost together, because we rarely didn't see Ghost in a suit, what made you feel like he would always be suited? He would always be meticulous. Like, what was it when you were reading that character that you decided this was his aesthetic?
Well, there were two people. I mean, there's James St. Patrick and there's Ghost. And one of the things that I sort of felt, and Omari and I, and Omari agreed, was just that putting him in a suit, and a suit with a particular like high arm's eye, would always give him a certain structure and a certain posture that would always remind him that he's in control. So that was one of the reasons why the suit was such an important element in establishing who this man was in that world that he was trying to control. Outside of the fact that he had to integrate, and move in different parts of New York City and in the world, and how he showed up.
Yeah, the iconic opening scene of Power, with him being in the club and going into the elevator down to the loading dock and basically handling business as not James St. Patrick, but as Ghost.
Right.
And I mean, that is one of the best scenes ever to me, especially introducing a show to its main characters. It was in your face. We are fly as hell. We go down, fucking handle business. Brother came down to his wife beater.
Right.
Freaking the girl screaming. Tommy got the gun in between the legs. Ghost questions old boy and says, that answer's not good enough.
Right.
Boop. Done. Go get my shit, put my shit back on, and go back up to the other world.
Yeah,
like, it was cool. I mean, epic television storytelling. It let the audience immediately know what the show was about.
Yeah.
And so when you read that scene, because Tommy was as fly as Ghost was, just in a different way. And so, like, the color of the suit, did you take all of that into consideration with this epic opening scene?
Yeah, to some degree. I mean, I think what I want to say in general to everybody is, like, I feel like all the characters are a part of me.
Yeah.
A part of who I am. And so some of it feels like it comes sort of innately and organically as to how I would show up in that space.
Right. Yeah.
I think, for Ghost in particular, it really was about trying to create a color that just felt strong and dark and moody for that opening sequence. And, Tommy just was always, a version of just moving through the space with function in mind, but fly.
Fly on the highest level of fly. My son was always like, Ghost is fly, but Tommy is the flyest. And again, you doing high end without throwing labels in people's faces. And that is where I think the show was unique in that way. And I think the show served, the fashion industry that way, because, there are people who want to dress in high-end clothing, but don't want the Fendi label, the Gucci label, the things all over the place that screams, look at me, I'm wearing designer. Tommy didn't say that at all.
No, no.
Like Tommy was so dope.
Yeah. I mean, it's tricky because I think what happens is like, I mean, I feel like for myself in my career, every project I've given the same amount of attention,
Mm-hmm.
same thought process,
Yeah.
same unique point of view and perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You know, being very blessed, Power has brought a lot of that to light and, through Ghost and all that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one of the things that I honestly worry about though, because
Yeah.
when you speak about that, and definitely I think through the franchises, but in particular, just transferring, let's just say, Power to Ghost.
Yeah.
At some point, you are following what is, if you're being organic, where contemporary culture is going.
Totally.
And Ghost was really about Ghost, James St. Patrick,
Mm-hmm.
and that world. It was the idea that you had money,
Mm-hmm.
but almost like a Frank Lucas, where you didn't want to blow it up to the point that everyone would just automatically assume that, oh, that's the guy in the white fur coat over there.
Right.
So there was a subtlety in the approach and the hand within which, I tried to sort of craft the St. Patrick's.
Yeah, which served the character because everything about Ghost, James St. Patrick, was I want to leave this world.
Right.
I want to be considered a businessman.
legitimate
I want to
businessman.
be legitimate. I
Yeah,
don't, I
100%.
want to separate myself from this other thing that people stereotypically put us in this box. And so he definitely, that's where I think you are very magical and gifted, because the difference is very apparent when you look at Ghost leading the way in Power, and now we transition into Ghost, the spinoff, where you have the young people who are a little more in your face, a little more driven by those kind of
Labels,
things,
which is where the culture
Exactly.
is. It's like
Exactly.
you're trying to fit into the world that
Right.
you
We're
move through it.
operating from.
Yeah, that you
Yes,
move through it.
exactly. Yeah.
And so, I oftentimes, I would sometimes go on interviews and people like, yeah, we don't want the, the Sex in the City,
Right. Right.
aesthetic,
Right.
where you're so known for something that you do that people want to say, I don't want that, because that's all they know you for.
Mm-hmm.
So, I hope, and thank you for having me here, is that
Mhm.
for people to understand that, as a creative, we're storytellers. And just because you
Right.
tell one story doesn't mean that's the only story you can tell.
100%.
And that, if you were to compare Power versus Ghost, there is a difference between the two. And it's based on the worlds that they move through.
Exactly. And that's why I think it's so
Yeah.
magical to point that out,
Yeah.
because the show's costume storytelling is very different.
Mm-hmm.
Tasha was the kind of label. If anybody there was a label,
Right.
it was Tasha. Where we pull into Ghost, and Monet is label. The younger guys are label. I
Ghost.
mean, her kids are, and it shows the difference in storytelling, and while still having the thread, right? The thread is there, but it's a different show.
It's Tribeca. It's
One-
Queens. It's two different
Exactly.
neighborhoods, two different ways, different
Totally.
ways of approaching your life and what's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. And so, like, preparing for a show like Power or Ghost versus a show, I forget what was the last show you did? I have that in my notes, but now I'm going to be searching too far for it. What was
Last
that? With
T-
the Tom Hanks.
Oh, A Man Called Otto.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, like, tell me what your approach in preparing for that show is versus a Power.
Well, let's start with environment. One
Yeah.
of which is the fact that you're talking about a working class town in Pittsburgh.
Mhm.
Somebody who works in the steel industry.
Mhm.
So it's creating characters that in particular that movie had a varied cast of characters that each with their own story that you're trying to convey,
Yeah.
but all within a certain working class environment. I think in designing for Otto or Tom, it was really trying to make him, not only approachable and I use that word loosely because his goal was not to be approached in life, as a character, but to make it tangible in a way emotionally, to the viewer. But at the same time, he's a person who didn't pay much attention to the way that he looked, versus the world we create now, where everyone pays attention to the way they look,
right?
So
and there is true art and craft in creating a character like that, because people would assume, oh, he's gonna, and no, it's like pulling it all away, taking it, stripping it down. And that's what I think a lot of people, and one of the reasons why I wanted to do this show is to hear the voices of the people that are behind the lenses, behind the curtains, behind so many things, because there's real art and process that goes into telling a story about a guy who doesn't want to be approachable.
Right.
Like you have to know when to put him in a dirty tank and run down jeans.
You have to be comfortable saying, okay, he has 3 sweaters.
Exactly.
And for 2 hours of cinema, that's all you're going to see.
That's all you're going to see.
Yeah.
That's all you're going to see. Yeah. And a tip of the hat to you, because here again is just showing your range of, you are a costume designer. You're not a stylist.
Right.
And there's so many people who have come into our industry who are stylists, who don't get that, right? Who don't get that art of storytelling, who will try to put somebody in a crispy white undershirt, even though, like, well, no, I put him in the white undershirt. Yeah, but it's crispy.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, and
no disrespect.
And it's no disrespect.
It's just that it's learning.
It's
right.
It's learning.
Yeah.
It's not just about being able to purchase clothes. It's not just about being able to make something. It's about being able to read, understand, converse, speak with an actor, speak with a director, get the essence of what story you're trying to tell, and then put it together through what's on their body.
Right. And your expertise, right?
Yeah.
Because they say stuff to you, but it's still you who then goes into the room.
You have to hear
and
it.
brings it to life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we as makeup artists and hairstylists, we take our cue from the costume designer. Like, we wait for your lead in so many situations. So, I just think it's important for people to understand that, especially aspiring costume designers, because now more than ever I feel like people are seeing the designers, especially since Ruth Carter has won 2 Oscars now. Long overdue in my opinion, but you are, but here you guys are, right? And for the young people who are coming up and maybe wanting to get into this business, it's really important for your voices to help them understand everything that it is to be a designer. So, but going away from that, you come from Baltimore.
Yes.
And was it in Baltimore that you decided you were going to be a costume designer, or when did that happen, and what was life like in Baltimore?
Well,
Fish festival.
Right. Well, I mean, I grew up in Baltimore at a time, and I still think Baltimore actually has quite a creative community.
Yeah.
My introduction to this world came when I was probably 14 or 15. I took a friend to host a television show.
Okay.
And she was too old. So I ended up being part of a cast of a television series.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Which is why I don't like being in front of the camera now, because I've been down that road before.
Okay.
So I was aware of it, but that's not where this came from. I think I always had an interest, just with my friends, the birth of MTV. I always say that, like, creativity or expression came through what you wore. Now, I, like most people, I had no idea that this existed. I had no idea, what that meant or what that appreciation was. That didn't really come until college. And, in terms of being able to make it a career. You know, I
Okay.
still liked fashion. I was still interested in it. You know, there was a lot of energy, but my
Mm-hmm.
path was not geared that way.
Yeah.
And then I met, I had a neighbor who had interned on Mo Better Blues in the
Oh,
prop
okay.
department.
Oh.
And she was like, "You seem to like clothes. I feel like you should
Mm-hmm.
meet Ruth Carter."
Yeah.
Oh wow.
And so I reached out to Ruth and I came to New York not knowing anything about this business, put on one good suit, which was a Yohji Yamamoto suit, thinking I was going to be really
Yes.
fashionable that day, not knowing A, that no one got dressed up, you know, it was
In New
B,
York.
not
In
at
New
all,
York.
not at all.
Exactly.
Showed up at
Yeah.
75 South Elliott, and guess who wasn't there? Ruth.
Oh.
So, I mean, you know, she was busy doing something
Yeah.
else,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So, long term, you know, long short, you know, I came back and, you know, I was an intern. And, you know, I will say, you know, Spike has blessed a lot of us with the, you know, opportunity to learn that
For
way,
sure.
which doesn't quite exist the same now in
Yeah.
terms
So
of
true.
people
It's so
entering the business.
Yeah.
You know,
Sadly.
sadly,
Yeah.
because it was a minority group of people trying to make big films. You needed all hands on deck, so you
Yeah.
learned a lot.
Yes, you did.
You know, so
Yes.
it wasn't that the new generation, no shade, new generation, but
Shade.
it's not coming in for 6 hours and can I go home
For
No,
free.
Right? If we
Mhm.
got subway tokens,
Yeah.
and we
For
were there.
free.
We were there.
All
That's all we
day.
got. All day. All day.
All day they gave us food
Real
and
intern. Real
tokens.
intern.
Interns. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we were real
Interns.
interns.
These kids
Yeah.
want to get paid now.
But that's, you know, that,
Yeah.
and that's literally how, you know, I always say I didn't find my career, found me.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
yeah, that's a great story. And so once you worked with Ruth Carter, who is legendary, Ruth Carter, did it take you a long time to start stepping into the role of costume designer?
About 10,
Or
I mean, I assisted a lot of people
okay.
past Ruth. I mean, I think that having, you know, Spike doing Malcolm X and, you know, Jungle Fever being my first sort of internship, and then, you know, having to learn really quickly and grow really quickly and move into the role of being an assistant on Malcolm X was a huge learning curve.
Mhm.
But, you know, post working with Ruth, and which a lot of people don't get, it's like, it's important to work with other people.
Yes,
And
it
I've
is.
worked, you know, I've had the blessing and fortune to work with a lot of really, really talented designers who've taught me many things.
Mhm.
So
I
it was
agree.
probably 10 years before I actually got my first design job as lead costume designer. That was Monsters Ball. And
Awesome.
again, I was being asked to groom someone else who was a stylist who had never had any film experience.
Mhm.
And the director's like, "Excuse me, but why are we doing that? Like,
Yeah.
you know, you should be the designer. Why are you
Oh,
teaching
thank
someone
God.
else how to be the
Wow.
designer?"
Yeah.
So yeah, that was Mark Forster. And so, you know, to this day, we still have
Yeah.
a great relationship and work together. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank God that
Yeah.
he, you know, because so many times, right, we don't know our place,
Right.
right? And so we'll just okay, that's what
Okay.
they want us to do. So that you know, you don't have your voice yet.
Well, I
And
had it. I was like,
yeah.
look, because a friend said,
Okay,
"Can you help?"
good.
And I was
Yeah.
like, well, but it's 10 years. I'm trying to do my own thing. Why would I
Yeah.
help you? But I will meet with the director.
Yeah.
And sort of that's how it happened.
And that's
Yeah.
how it happened.
Yeah.
And thank goodness for that. Because, you know, we had to know freaking Frank Fleming, honey.
So going back,
Because
Mm-hmm.
what was your major in college?
Which one? I went from a law degree.
Oh wow.
that's why he has those big SAT words. Honey.
Yeah, I know.
Because, honey, Frank will throw a
Throw something
big
you like.
SAT
for a
word
long
on
time, I
it.
thought I wanted to be a lawyer.
Yeah, but see, you saved me.
and-
Google saved me. Every time you throw a word at me, I'm like,
I
oh,
was
let me go
stopping.
around the corner.
Stop.
Let me go around the corner. Okay.
But marketing, merchandising is where I ended up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did that help you in your career? Law and marketing.
I
Think
think
about
so. Yeah. I mean, you know, ultimately, I think, you know, to get where we are, which is fortunate that we moved into the areas of producing, I think
Yeah.
it has taught us, you know, to think broader, to think bigger, how to move through certain rooms, how to organize your thoughts, how to deal with more. I mean, what we do, yes, the creative is of its own ilk and challenges, but we know what people should know. It's a little bit more than to what we do than that. I mean, you know, there are several, you know, things we have to negotiate: budgets, personalities, you know, studios. and that all helps.
Yeah,
Having a
agreed.
management.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think. And when you're releasing people, because you've had a couple of moments in the Power universe where you've had to make changes, and how do you approach making those changes? That's tricky.
I, you,
And no disrespect to anyone, it just sometimes
honestly,
it just doesn't work.
honestly, what I was going to say earlier, that I think the most important thing, that one skill set that's important for us to have, that I think is major, is the ability to listen,
Mm-hmm.
discern, take a note, and then apply it.
Right.
And the reason that we've had challenges is that oftentimes people aren't able to take the note,
Mm-hmm.
discern, and implement.
Mm-hmm.
So it's never necessarily about, per se, my judgment of someone's talent. It
Right.
really is about my judgment of someone's ability to tell the story.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think people will get in their feelings, or misunderstand, or misrepresent, or find themselves feeling a certain way, and all I ever try to convey is like, this is not my personal judgment, because
Right.
everyone gets dressed every day, and everyone has
Yes.
their point of view,
Mhm.
and there's
Right.
no right or wrong. It's just the story that we're telling, and
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes, because we have established the characters,
Mm-hmm.
you have to maintain them.
You have to maintain them, exactly, and you have to listen. It's just what it is. Like there's a couple of times where I'm like, there's just too much makeup on them.
Mhm.
Like, this isn't the story that we're trying to tell. And I
Absolutely.
know that, especially, like in this new vibration, because I feel like Power, they knew. Like, Naturi knew she was the glam glam. Like, nobody else was gonna really be as glam as her.
Right.
But when you move into the new show, you have to like remind people there is a level of elevation that Courtney wanted, right? But at the same time, we still need to have it feel organic and not be distracted by what it is that we're doing
Right.
in order for the story to be told. So I do, I feel you on that, because it's like, I'm not trying to tell you that you're not
A strong makeup artist, a good makeup artist.
Exactly.
It's like, it's just like, just help me tell the story.
I just want you to tell the
Story.
story.
Trust me.
Yes. So, but it's interesting, right? Because you get people who are new into the business. And I will say that is the great thing about being an intern and being someone who has to like do the hard work first, because you learn so much
You do.
when you're doing that.
I'll give you a perfect example. I worked for a designer, and and it's just super talented. Donna Zakowska is Miss
Yeah.
Maisel.
Yeah.
And when I would assist Donna, and we were doing a film with Meryl Streep, and she'd be like, okay, I want you to go get a scarf, and I want it to be this color blue.
Mm-hmm.
And what you realize is, and I always say, people, every experience you gain something from. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I gained from her was, she's super talented, but is that she was a painter.
Right.
So she looks at color from the point of view and perspective of a painter.
Yeah.
And it took me like, maybe 13 tries to try to get that right blue scarf before I realized, I was like, oh, you're dealing with pure color.
Right. Right.
It's not synthetic. So
Right.
like my eye for color, I can say, came from working with someone who taught me to look at color differently.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I have designers who come in, and I'll look in their eyes. I was like, okay, I guess I should tell you, I like things with true value of color.
Right.
Because it's pure. Like, I understand that you think it's pink, but it's not even a true pink. It's like a synthetic. Like, don't bring me that synthetic, because it's not gonna. But it's things that you learn from each experience, and not all experiences are going to be a great experience. But then you take that and say, okay, I know I don't want to do that.
Exactly. And they don't have to be great.
Yeah.
Every experience doesn't have to be great.
No.
You can be like, that shit sucked, but hopefully you grabbed something from it that you can carry with you, because you should carry from anyone that's teaching you,
Mm-hmm.
whether you like how they teach or not. you have to be able to take something away.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And honestly, you have to be resilient to last in this business.
Oh my gosh,
Oh.
do you? Because it's a mean
It's a beast.
freaking
It's
business.
a beast. It'll chew you up, spit you out.
No, I mean, look, I work with a producer and this, will be no names in this
Yeah,
one.
no name.
Why
But
not?
no, I can't. I'm too big a person.
Oh,
No. Yeah.
But just simply to say that, a big personality who doesn't have a lot of experience, but knew everything about everything
Mm-hmm.
and interfered in every
Ugh.
department.
Ugh.
And, to the point that people were quitting, the
Yeah.
whole thing.
Yeah.
And, to myself, I was like, I can't do this.
Right.
Like, this is not a representation of me. It's not a representation of my work, what I've been asked to do.
Yeah.
And, one of the challenges that people will find is that you have to try to find that balance.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always going to be what we want it to be, as
Right.
we always know. We can come to,
100%.
I see it this way.
Yep.
Actor sees it that way. Director may see it that way.
There's a
and
lot
it may
of
not
opinions.
There's a lot of opinions.
Yeah.
So what we have to do is to find that happy medium. But what I learned was like, I created so much angst and drama in myself every day. I'm like, I can't do this. I'm going to walk away from that job.
Right.
Like, this is too much. It's not even what I do.
Right.
And then when it was over, you're like, what was that all for?
Right. Right.
Like, why was I being so dramatic?
Yeah. You know, sometimes.
And you get through it.
Yeah.
And I don't have to say, like, sometimes
Yeah.
you have to persevere.
Mm-hmm.
You can be your own worst enemy
100%.
Oh, yes.
Oh my goodness, yes.
and learning and growing in this business.
Yes.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. Daniel,
It's
you can.
balance, yeah. It's definitely balance.
Uh-huh.
So if you wasn't a designer,
No. What would I be?
what would you be? Tell the
Oh,
truth. Tell the truth.
oh God.
If you had to change your career right now,
Oh, right now.
right now.
Oh.
Everybody has a second career.
Well, I would love to own a club. I would love to spin music. That's my passion.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, no, I would
That
never
makes-
have guessed
I would
that.
never- Exactly.
Now, if it
So
had to
that's
be
why
on,
you've been out all night.
that's why I was out all night. I was sampling, hearing what they were doing. Yeah, but
He's trying to go to sleep, but he's not. With this designer, look at his fans. Look at it. Look at it. It's nice.
I know, but the socks would have been better today. Sorry, y'all.
That's okay.
But this is, if
We
you
don't
know me,
see.
every meeting we have since COVID is a Zoom. I'm on a sofa like this.
Yes,
So this is
exactly.
normal.
And that's the great thing about Zoom.
That sure is.
So many great things came from COVID.
Absolutely.
So
So,
what you
many
think about
great
that?
things.
AI. You think that's gonna do anything to your business?
I mean, ultimately, of course. I mean, but I think, again, it comes to something that I think we will still need to be technicians. I still think you have to refine it. I
Yeah,
think it'll
I agree.
take over for a while.
Not
Yeah.
for a while,
Not
but
for a
it is certainly something that needs to be considered and
Absolutely.
needs to be like we need to figure out how to incorporate into what it is that we do AI. Like, because we can't just sit here and act like it's not coming.
No, it's true. There's it's a new technology,
Mhm.
and particularly that would affect you guys, called Darkgram, I believe,
Mhm.
which basically it's pivot points
Yeah.
that will change the expression,
Yes.
smile on any
Oh.
two-dimensional, soon to
Yeah.
be three-dimensional. So,
Yeah.
can change the eye
I've
shape.
I've seen
this.
it.
Like,
I've
yeah,
seen
it's
it.
crazy. Yeah.
Like I watched. I told you
Yeah,
I
you told
watched
me.
this. I follow this TikToker who talks about twin flames,
Mm.
and she always has these amazing graphics
Mhm.
of AI like technology, and you watch. She'll like say something about a twin flame. And you'll watch the girl's eyeshadow color change.
Wow.
And you'll watch a man go from like an African tribal leader to an indigenous American Indian tribal leader, like right, like
And,
in seconds.
well,
In seconds it's happening.
And who knows? I mean,
It's amazing.
that very well may be where we land in our business. That They
Yeah.
don't need any of us because
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I say I think
Yeah.
that the sooner, and this is really speaking to people who are coming into our business as we are transitioning ourselves into new roles in the business and everything. But, I think that to not understand how AI is working and the future of AI, you will do a disservice
to
to
yourself.
your being successful in this business, because it is on the horizon, and it's dynamic. I mean, it is what it is. It's fascinating what it can do. Like, it's
Absolutely.
like, oh wow, and we just skimming the surface.
Well, I mean, look, it's, you could talk about like design for Avatar. I mean, obviously,
Right.
And you brought that up the
Yeah.
other day.
I mean, you still needed a designer who still worked with,
Yeah.
a shop to build
Yeah.
bits that were shot.
Yeah.
But once the technology changes with cameras and, and as with all things, it would probably be a boom. And then all of a sudden we'll go back to like, what happened to the old days when people used to get dressed?
Yeah.
Things come in cycles.
Yeah, and I do think that
But I agree with you.
it'll pour and then it'll go back, and
Yeah.
it'll work itself out. But it's very interesting and quite fascinating to me. I'm like blown away by freaking AI. But anyway,
So let me ask you some questions. So how did you get started on, and how did you decide to want to do the gloss?
okay, so no. We're now going to ask you.
And how'd you talk Daniel into being your partner in crime?
That's a natural thing.
That's a
I think I
natural
lost
thing.
my hair.
Okay.
But I want to ask you
Sure.
about this is Frank now. It's
Okay.
nothing to do with costume design. You're one of the things that I admire the most about you. And there are a lot of things that I admire about you, but one of the things that I admire the most is your unapologetic attitude towards traveling and getting away and going and seeing the world and like, you give thought to it. It's not like you just show up and stay in a hotel, and like when I watch you move in that space, I admire it so much because I don't know how to do that. And so talk to me about why that's important, why you are so unapologetic about it.
Well, honestly, I'm unapologetic about it because it actually fuels me creatively.
Yeah.
I feel that, as storytellers, it's important to see the world because when you're in a room and you're looking at something, you then have an immediate point of reference in your mind. It's like, okay, well, all right, we're talking about Italy. Okay, yeah, that quickly I can think about what was the broad general strokes of Italian, street fashion at this point in time. So, I've always traveled, one, for the reboot, and secondly, just because I've always, I feel that it really fuels me creatively to keep going.
And at what point, like, was that something that you saw growing up in Baltimore, or is that something that as you like move through your life, you started through either personal experiences with people? Like, what made you like say, you know what, I'm gonna go to Italy, or I'm gonna go to Greece, or I'm gonna go to Brazil?
Well,
Like, what
okay.
made you the world travel? Because you don't just travel, you like cross the water.
Okay. So, I mean, it's a combination. I mean, it's probably a combination of things, but let's just say I, from a very modest family who was concerned about like my education, right? So I went to, a very privileged all boys school where people had a lot of money.
Yeah.
So you get a taste for aspirational living when that's not your reality.
Yes.
Our reality was getting in the car and driving to Florida for 12 hours.
Yeah.
And then beating the hurricane back. That was our reality. That was, but I knew there was something bigger and greater out there.
Right.
So, which then circles back to another question you asked me, which I was initially going to answer, was just that I had a really close cousin, and we used to, like, when we were 16, sit in this restaurant on Charles Street in Baltimore and just listen to Sade on the jukebox was the old thing, but
Mhm.
and plan how we were going to get away,
Yeah.
and how
Awesome.
we were going to move and create a future for ourselves.
Yeah.
And so it's funny because you're talking about what those inspiring moments. Like I can't say that inspired me to be in fashion, but it inspired me to say I knew that I wanted to get outside of Baltimore, and I knew I wanted to experience the world.
I love that.
So it started at a really young age, knowing that there was more. Like when all your classmates like, oh yeah, I'm going, to Verbier or someplace like that for the
where are these
holidays.
places?
Where are these places? So,
Yeah.
and then later in life, I had a partner who was from another country, so I started to travel a lot then.
Yeah. I think it's so important to see the world and to not be afraid of seeing the world. And I've traveled the world, but I don't make it a point, and probably just because of where my life was, becoming a mother and a wife and all those things. But it is something that as we were doing Power, I swear, like every season we would end, oh, I'm going to Brazil, oh, I'm going to Greece, oh, I'm going here, I'm going there, and I would be like, I want to go, and I would wait for your post on Instagram. Like, you don't know these things, but though, because those things inspire me. Right. Even if I haven't done it to this date, I know that I want to go back out and see the world. So, I just love that.
It's important. I mean, honestly, and it also just sets you up for a certain comfort level. I mean, Frank personally, but even Frank work, which is to say that, when you get offered that job in another country, you're not intimidated by picking up and landing and going someplace. I mean, I've had to go to Afghanistan by myself. I've had to go to Pakistan by myself for work. Afghanistan in the middle of a war where there was one cart and I had 200 pounds of luggage, and the one-eyed man was like, "Here, you take it." But where there was
what can be intimidating,
which was the security perimeter was 3 miles away from the airport because of bombs. And I've shot in Western China. I've shot in Kazakhstan.
I mean, everywhere.
So but my comfort level to drop into that place and feel like, okay, I'm just here to do my job and I belong and it's business as usual, in part comes from having traveled, already. It wasn't that I was overwhelmed or shocked. It was just like, okay, here we go.
And I think that's
another experience.
I think it's important for people to hear that, because we don't know the future of this business, but what we do know about this business is that we tell stories from all over the world. From all over the world. You can't be afraid to go wherever the work takes you.
I mean, literally, I had to, when we prepped the Kite Runner, we're shooting a film about Afghanistan and Western China. Yes, I had to go to Afghanistan to meet actors and try and do, in a very, in 4 days, get the things that I could get, but in reality is absorb enough of the culture that I could then take it back and make it authentic and as real as possible to build it in China. So you're creating a Muslim culture in China. I mean, there is a Muslim culture, but it's not the same. And feeling confident, that it's a huge book with a huge release, that you are not appropriating a culture, but telling the story the right way through the right lens from a 4-day experience. Research, but
and that's the thing is going and sitting in the cafe and just watching people, watching mannerisms, watching how they move, watching how they put their coat on, and like all of these things actually really matter when we are creating and then putting a story out for the world because if we're doing our job correctly,
people believe it.
People get lost in the experience of watching. And this is why, right, being authentic, not overdressing someone, not overpainting them, not spending so much time, because we want them to get lost. We don't want them to be caught up on
that's a distraction.
Anything. So I think it's important for the aspiring to hear these little nuances that make a difference. I have other things, but mother doesn't have a glass.
Off the top of your head, you can ask me anything.
So I decided to start the gloss.
No, but
Mother's had up a couple of drinks, but
but I mean, it just in terms of, I asked you that question just
Uh-huh.
because, we're all growing creatively.
Yeah.
And like what inspired you,
Yeah.
to.
So, okay. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to say now is, because it'll get to that answer. So you and I, season 4. So I came to you and I was like, Frank, you already know. Like, you watching this one and this one and this one move up. Like, all of these people are moving up on this power thing, and me and you are still sitting in the same spot. And we bring so much to the table, right?
Right.
Not that other people don't, but it's like we would watch, the elevation of our colleagues, which is fine, right? And so we both decided, right, that we have voices that are broader and bigger than what our positions were, right? And so we both went into Courtney's office and we started our first pitch, which was the end of season 4 of Power. People think that this just was handed to us, and it was not. I mean, we legitimately pitched her for 3 seasons to have a voice that could help her to a major degree, because she at that point couldn't be there all the time.
Right.
And so there were a lot of dynamics that had us pitching ourselves into a bigger role, right? And so let's just talk about that, because I think it was only because they were like, oh, nobody's ever done it. And I think only a costume designer had done it.
Correct.
And so just talk a little bit about that.
I didn't know that.
Oh,
Yeah,
well, like,
yeah.
Ryan Murphy uses Lou Eyrick like that, because he has so many shows, but creatively that's his eye and the person that he trusts. And so, as we were growing as a universe and knowing that we were going to multi-platforms, and Courtney, appreciating and respecting us enough to want to be a part of all of those things, it was like, okay, like, this is a position. Like,
Right.
it really is a producing position creatively that we're establishing the looks and, trying to keep the brand as it, on track, across all the universes. And, it was a little bit of a pitch.
Yeah.
it was a pitch.
At the end of every season.
Yeah.
We respectfully waited for the season to end, and then
Right.
we'd go back in the room and go, listen, we can help you in another way. And it finally, right? And so how are you embracing that? Like, is that...
I'm still figuring it out, and I'm so proud of you. I think you figured it out in a way that feels organic and true to you, and I applaud you for that. I'm still trying to figure out what it means to me, because Courtney used to say, Frank, you should direct because you know stories better than most of the directors come in. I'm not sure that I like being on set that many hours a day, but I do like storytelling.
Right.
To be honest with you,
Yeah.
because I want to see something done the way that I want it done from start to finish. I want it to look a certain way.
Yeah.
So I'm still growing inside as to figure out how and where my next step in this would be. I don't want to necessarily be a money producer. Like, I would like to be a creative producer, potentially, storyteller. But that's a little harder to place yourself in that without either finance or talent.
Right. Or just, like recognizing a great script, right? And understanding how to pitch that script.
Right.
Because I do feel like you are very strong in that. like just sitting in, listening to content meetings and tone meetings, or just what you bring to the table when certain things are being discussed. Is it you have a different vision? And I do think because you were a costume designer, there's a
I think I'm a good editor.
yeah.
Sometimes I always say I'm not always like, yes, look, I read an article today about there's, anyway, 4 or 5 things that you should do or shouldn't do to help you grow mentally.
Yeah.
And that 99% of us, believe it or not, think that the way that we think is correct.
Right. Yes.
And because of conformity,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
most in general, if you're agreeing with everybody else, and you actually need to stop and think that you should be the 1% that not thinking like everybody else.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So
that's you.
So now I challenge myself, because you can walk the room.
challenge.
It's a challenge.
Yes.
So I
challenge.
think so. What I'm going to say is that when I say that I think I'm a better editor sometimes, I know that I have an eye and I can be creative.
Yeah.
But what I'm very good at sometimes is taking other people's ideas and making it better.
Yeah. And I agree with that.
Yeah.
Like I think that that you are so strong in that, and always have been. Like I've heard that voice for a long time now. So I just feel like in that to me is a natural, organic space for you.
Yeah, I just got to figure out what that means.
Yeah, it's getting a bunch of scripts sent to you,
Yeah.
and then figuring out which ones are really great,
Right.
and based off of all the relationships that you have with so many, like Dorothy Canton and people like that you go, I think you should read this script. I think this is a great script.
Right.
Like that's what I
Right.
feel. So anyway, so this is that's it.
We did it.
We did it.
Thanks for coming. I'll take these pants.
And
I'll
thank
take
you
the
so
check.
much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Thank you.
For coming and hanging out. You barely touched your drink.
Because I did not want to be slurring my words.
Yes, and you did fantastic.